Hello, everyone. This is another Freedom to Feel conversation, and my guest today is Dr. Richard Taborga. He's a licensed mental health counselor, nationally certified counselor, qualified supervisor, and the founder and clinical director of South Florida Counseling and Assessment. So, this is my brief introduction to you, Richard. The full bio will be at the end of this video. But a question that I love asking my guests, all of them from the get-go for some reason, is how do you describe yourself in this very moment? Who is Richard?
Well, I think I consider myself someone who's very lucky because I'm passionate about what I do.
Yeah.
I love what I do. I'm still fascinated after 15 years of doing this. I'm still fascinated with learning more about psychology, helping people, and just all the aspects that have come with this journey in this phase of my life.
Yeah.
I think that apart from the fulfillment and joy that I get from work, everything that I've learned has helped me grow as a person as well. So I guess it's one of those things where I don't only preach it, but I practice it as well.
Yeah, so it comes hand in hand. It's that integration, right, of doing
Yeah,
something to help others or out of fascination and curiosity, but also growing with it. There's,
sure.
why not, right? It sounds very natural. It seems to be very natural, something like that to happen. So I asked you the question off record about what inspired you, and you said that. And what caught my attention was that you said was not really to help people.
Yeah,
It was to learn more. It came from a sense of curiosity to just dive into the world of mine. So, and you mentioned something about the brain. So a question that I used to ask, and I'll ask you: do you see a difference between the brain and the mind? Are they one and the same to you, or somehow
sure.
separate?
Well, to answer your question, you're right. The first thing that got me into this profession, or got me really fast, is that I was fascinated with psychology.
Yeah.
Like most people, it was a psychology 101 course in college, and it was an elective, so it really wasn't my. I think at the time my major was biology, and but learning about the mind or the brain chemistry, the parts of the brain, the connection between our thoughts, our feelings, how our experiences in childhood impact the way we perceive the world today.
Right.
All of it to me was this new world that I never knew existed. And all these theorists and research, it was just fascinating to me. It was the first time that things came to me very easily, and I started just viewing things in a different way. It wasn't until a little later
Right.
as I mentioned, during the end of my bachelor's degree, that I did some internships, and then all of a sudden found that, man, it feels really good to help people too. Like apart from this fascination with psychology, there's this other part too that I didn't know existed, which was just helping people.
Yeah.
And so yeah, my journey, I guess, started a little later when I went back to school, but certainly it's been an amazing journey for me since then.
Yeah, and I can see that. Yeah, even the way you speak, yeah, it resonates. It just is a transmission of that. So, do
Yeah.
you see a difference between the mind and the brain, or are they one and the same?
Well, I think a lot of times when we think of the mind, it is what we're thinking is our thoughts and the things that come about and the way we think.
Right.
And when we think of the brain, perhaps what we're thinking about is neurobiological aspects of the brain. And so neurotransmitters and how different parts of our brain are activated, or the changes that our brains take, let's say through trauma or past experiences that may be traumatic.
Yeah.
And so I definitely, of course, think they're intertwined, and certainly one doesn't exist without the other.
Yes. There's a part of the mind, perhaps, that we can call it that is able to observe the movements of mind, like thoughts,
Sure.
memories, imagination. So everything, the body, it sees everything, and it's um it's kind of observing in a way. You probably heard about the observer. So that's very common in psychology, but this is also in spiritual teachings. And that kind
So
of
that's great.
I don't know, that gives us an insight into how there's a lot more. It's not just the mind and the brain. There's something else. Perhaps there's something that overarches this, the body and mind. That's
Mhm.
what the studies that I really engage in, and I'm
Right.
so curious about that. And it feels
Yeah,
true. I don't know, Richard, that we are actually observing everything. So it's not
yeah,
really. In that case, we are not the mind and body. We are just something else. And maybe that's what
yeah.
people, some people call it God or consciousness. I don't know.
Mhm.
How do you see that in the sense of, do you have any spiritual understandings of yourself, views of life at this point?
Yeah. Well, I think that, and especially with clients when they come, many, of course, have their religious beliefs. And as a therapist, it's not my job to instill my belief system on them, but to
Right,
help
right.
them explore and embrace their spiritual beliefs. And based on that, identify or create what might be an ideal self for them, what might be the best version of them based on these belief systems or values that they've gotten through religion.
Right.
And so I think I'd say we're the only animals that are able to do that, to create meaning from our thoughts, create a narrative of what our life means. And certainly, spirituality and religion gives us a set of values, a belief system that can guide us in our not only in how we perceive the world, but in our actions that we take every day. Um,
Mm,
and the whole thing about the mind goes back to as far as we can think. Um, People understanding the mind and the consciousness, or trying to understand it better. Um, so yeah, I mean, I would say that I grew up Catholic, but I think I would be very spiritual, almost a humanist, as far as I just believe in, not doing people harm
yeah.
and doing good as much as I can, and living my life in a way that helps me to be the best version of me in every aspect of my life. I truly feel that part of me being blessed and things, me being happy in life is because I choose to live that way.
Yeah. So that's interesting that you said that about not doing harm. So that would come from perhaps this belief system or this understanding that everything's connected. So that
Sure.
would be a very spiritual kind of idea, concept per se.
Hmm.
Anyway, so the topic is for today's conversation is managing stress in a stressful world. So when I got this title from you, the first question that came to me, I'm very curious about these things. Why do you think we live in a stressful world? What got us here? Why are we here in this
Yeah.
situation?
Well, I think that, stress is this natural response that involves a complex interaction between our mind, our body, and our environment.
Yeah.
Um, Most people think of stress as a negative thing, as something we want to get rid of. But stress can motivate us. It could help us to be more alert and perform better in certain situations where it's needed. And if I get bad news from my physician that I have some type of medical illness, then perhaps stress will motivate me to live a healthier life,
Yeah.
to eat better, to sleep better, to follow up with doctor's visits. And in that case, it becomes a healthy thing. Stress, and I say in a stressful world because stress has always been there. It's if we break it down, stress is this activation of the sympathetic nervous system,
Yes. True.
um, and it comes about when we perceive that there's danger. If we think back to the caveman, danger was life and death. He might get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, and so it was life and death. But now, danger can be to our self-esteem, it can be to our livelihood, it can be to our happiness, and so all of those things still elicit that same response when we perceive danger.
Right.
And so I say in a stressful world because while stress is often based in a subjective idea of what we think is stress, um, it's always been there and it's helped us survive. It's no, um, it's no surprise that if the stressed caveman was the one who survived because he was the one who was always aware of the dangers and always ready to fight or escape,
Right.
then we survived and we evolved to be the people we are, who are also stressed. I mean, the caveman that was relaxed, the optimistic caveman who thought, yeah, there's danger out there, but it won't happen to me, and wasn't prepared, was probably very relaxed, but he lived a very short life because he was quickly eaten by a saber-toothed tiger.
Right.
So, it's just, if we think way back even then, it was a stressful world then. Um, I think the difference now is, of course, that we have more awareness of and more information out there to help us manage our stress.
Right. So in a sense, I don't know, you actually wrote something interesting about in your blog post on your website
Mhm.
about the things we can control in what we cannot control. So
Yes.
that really resonated with me in the sense of it was not the power of choice. Yeah, yeah, under the power of choice. That's one of them. And you
Great.
talk about the choice theory and then the five basic needs, and then what we can control versus what we cannot. So that kind of came to mind immediately. Oh my God, that has a lot to do with the stress in a sense because we want to control everything. Some of us, and we
Yeah, yeah,
feel like we could do something, but there are some things we cannot control, especially those things, the imprints that come from wow
yeah,
thousands of years ago. It's part of this body. So talk to me
yeah,
for a moment about that. I know I'm all over the place here. I made a lot of notes and I had your
yeah.
guided questions, but
No
I'm not
problem.
linear in any way.
No, you're absolutely right. There are some things that we can control, and there are some things we can't control. When I think about managing stress, I think of it in two approaches: a problem-focused approach and an emotion-focused approach.
Mm,
A
yeah,
problem-focused approach are actions that we can take to change the situation, and it should be our first line of defense always. An emotion-focused approach focuses on changing how we feel by changing how we think. Right. So if we can control how we think, we can control how we feel. Um, and so a problem focused approach might be becoming more organized, more disciplined, improving our planning, our scheduling, managing our time more effectively, prioritizing tasks, being assertive, communicating our needs, or asking for help, establishing boundaries.
yeah,
All of those are things that we can do to change a situation when a difficulty arises. But sometimes we can't. Sometimes we can't control a situation. The death of a loved one, no matter what we do, we can't bring them back. And so once we've tried to change a situation, or if we can't change a situation, we're forced to change how we think about a situation.
right.
And that's an emotion focused approach. And when I think of that, I think of two different ways. One is actively changing how we think. The other is not engaging, teaching our brain not to engage those thoughts. So a little more of a meditative, mindful approach to allowing thoughts to be there without engaging them.
Right.
But either way, the first step to either one of those is to become aware of our thoughts. As we were talking before, observing your mind, noticing the tendencies of your mind, noticing that, wow, my mind goes here when I'm stressed. Um, and that should be a sign. The first sign should be I'm stressed.
Yes.
That should be a clue that it's time for me to sit back or go somewhere and just explore what am I thinking that's causing me to be stressed. Um, Acceptance can go a long way, for changing how we think. Acceptance, accepting that it's a stressful time, accepting that there are some things we can't control. Um, I will say this: we talked about religion a little bit. Um, that religion also helps us to accept what we can't control, to have faith
Yeah.
that perhaps there's a greater purpose to our struggling or our suffering, um, allows us to have hope that we are being cared for in some way that perhaps we're not aware of. So, whether it's religion or more of a psychological approach, changing how we think can be helpful. And as I said, we're aware of patterns of thinking. And these patterns of thinking
Yes.
are often learned um, throughout our life, and we've been able to identify cognitive distortions. So if your viewers just look up cognitive distortions, there's a whole list of them, and some of them are things like catastrophic thinking, right? When we think the worst possible outcome, and fail to see all the in-between possibilities. If we go back to our caveman example, he had to catastrophize. He didn't have time to think of all the possibilities, that maybe that saber-toothed tiger won't eat me, that maybe he'll chase me but he won't catch me, maybe he'll see me but I'll get away in time. So to him it was very simple. I need to think of the worst possible outcome so I can survive. And so just like that, there's just a lot of different ways of thinking that once we're able to observe them, we're able to change them. But a lot of us we're not aware that we have these patterns of thinking. We just accept that this is true, that if I think it, it's true.
Right.
So yeah, there's just many ways of changing our thoughts, whether it be reframing and finding a positive outcome, becoming aware of that negative inner critic that we all have, that can often be harsh and critical or judgmental or unfair or judgmental, and replacing it perhaps with a more nurturing, gentle, caring, loving, or encouraging self-talk. I always think of like that nurturing and loving parent. Even if your parent wasn't that nurturing and loving parent,
Yes. Yeah.
but you can be that parent for yourself sometimes and talk to yourself in that way. So yeah, all of these go back to just changing how we think, whether it be developing affirmations, or developing gratitude. I know gratitude normally comes out a lot when it's Thanksgiving. That's when everybody talks about gratitude. But I read some interesting research a while ago in positive psychology, and it discussed how one negative thing in our life weighs just as much as three positive things. And so one criticism would weigh just as much as three compliments, let's say. And I thought about that. I'm always thinking about the caveman. And so I thought, of course, the negative things stick with us automatically.
Yeah.
The caveman, when he almost got eaten by the saber-toothed tiger, that stuck with him because that was survival. The positive things don't stick with us that easily because they're not always needed for survival. So if we understand it that way, then it takes energy, it takes effort to notice and embrace the small things, the positive things every day, just so you can balance it out, just so you can balance the negative things out. And most people, I think, in this society, we've become people that we look for the big things. We look for that big raise, we look for that nice car or the house, and fail to notice all the little pleasures, all the great things in life. Every single day, every moment, they're there. If we look for them, we can find them and train your brain to be more aware and recognize them more. The little things are a good cup of coffee. For me, it's a café con leche. When I find a little mom and pop place that sells a good café con leche, I am so happy about that. It's a breeze, it's a palm tree, it's a clear sky, it's a beautiful flower, it's a friendly smile from a neighbor. All of these little pleasures are there every single day, and most of the time, we don't take time to really embrace them and notice them. So teaching your brain to do that can certainly help you manage stress or just live a more fulfilled and happy life.
Wow. What can I say about that? So true. That is a billion yeses to that. Yes, Richard. Right. If we can just see, as you mentioned earlier about, seeing the environment, you said, I love where I live, being able to fall in love with the same place, the same person, the same simple things over and over again. It's like seeing things from it's a fresh perspective, a fresh angle. There's something about freshness. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, wow, you said so many things. That's something to take in, really, to apply that. If everyone actually started practicing that, we would change the world, not just ourselves, but the environment.
Absolutely.
Everything would change.
Yeah. I think unfortunately, I think a lot of people have accepted that this is just life, that it's stressful like that, that's
Right.
Part of living is stress. Um, and if you've accepted that, then there's really no one wanting to change it. But if you see it as a problem and you recognize that I can change it, whether again through meditation or mindfulness, whether it be with the help of therapy or religion, um, whatever it is,
Yeah.
there's really no one way. We can find many ways or more than one way to change how we feel.
Right. That's it. Yeah. Thank you for saying that too. Right. Yeah. I often say that's wonderful to have therapists, coaches, therapists. They feel like a best friend. Every time I meet one,
Yeah.
I feel that way. My heart opens. It's just a very relaxing kind of environment. Like, oh, I'm talking to a friend. That's what it feels like.
And I think the stigma around therapy has changed a lot, which is amazing. I think even in the time that I've been doing therapy in the last 15 years,
Right.
um, we've just went from a highly stigmatized profession to where it's on TV. A lot of famous people are saying they have therapists, and people are beginning to really access services more. Different cultures and different races are now engaging in therapy, which is great. Um,
Yes.
it's just, I think it's definitely been really nice to see people understand and embrace psychology.
Right. Yeah. Me too. Right. Right. You oh, I have so many questions here, way too many open questions. And you said a lot of interesting things just now. Yeah, about the pattern, the thinking, the thoughts. If we can change the way we think, then we can change the way we live, the way we feel, and
Sure.
everything else. So one of the biggest issues, problems that I had, I remember, was believing that I was my thinking, the patterns. And every
Mm,
time I thought, it was just so repetitive. And I thought that was me. Oh, this is who I am.
yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
was not just that was true. It was just, it's worse than that. I thought it was me. That was me. My
Sure.
repetitive patterns, negative patterns, that was me. So that
Yeah,
was
yeah,
really got me stuck for many years. I couldn't really get out of that pattern, that
yeah,
thinking, the mindset of
yeah,
believing I
yeah.
was.
I think a lot of people go through that. A lot of people, when I meet them, are stuck there too. Use a good word, being stuck in that
Yeah,
idea that my thoughts are facts. That because I think it, it's true. It's not. And the moment that we recognize that we have power in changing those thoughts,
yes,
that those thoughts developed from years and years of years without us knowing, but we can put energy towards changing those thoughts. Um, but the moment that we become aware of that, and there's power in choice in choosing to change those thoughts. So yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of us, I was one too. I was one person like that too that thought, if I think it's true,
yeah.
you know. But but yeah, I just think we've come a long way in understanding a lot of those things and being able to change them and manage them better.
Right. That's some wonderful news. I mean, it's just incredible to meet people like that. Not just, I know you're a psychotherapist, you work in this business, but I meet sometimes coaches and people, regular people, authors,
Sure,
that they are also
sure,
engaging in these concepts. They are making them part of their lives.
yeah,
And you also mentioned reparenting. That's something that was the first thing that came to me, as a powerful idea that I could put into practice too, that I could reparent myself because I didn't have loving parents. So I had to
yeah,
learn
yeah.
that at the age of 35, I believe. I had to learn how to treat myself with kindness and be
Sure.
loving. It was an incredible journey.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think for a lot of us, even there are cultural aspects to parenting. There are just even if our parents were good parents,
Right.
there are little things, and the way that children internalize many of these messages that parents send is also different for everybody. A parent who is watchful and sees a child about to grab a glass off the table and says to that child, "Don't touch that! Don't touch that! No, no, no! I'll do it for you."
Yeah.
Might be sending a message to a child that they think that they're unable to do things, right? And not every child, but some people will internalize that way. There's also just cultural factors, I think, for on Hispanic. And so I know for the Hispanic culture, many times the idea is that
Right.
children learn if you show them everything they're doing wrong. And so they focus many times on telling you what you're doing wrong with the idea that you'll learn and you'll do it right from then on. But the problem with that becomes that then you're teaching children to notice all the negative things in life, all the bad things. And those children will grow up to have partners, and they're going to notice all the negative things in those partners and in their own lives. And so, I think in this culture,
Right.
we now focus on reinforcing desired behaviors, recognizing when a child is doing something right and praising him for it. But that's gotten some criticism too, right?
Yeah.
I guess it's about finding that balance of teaching, but also recognizing the effort and praising that effort and shaping children to grow up and be adults like us that don't have to reparent themselves that much.
Right. Yeah. That's so true. Yeah. The culture, the differences, right? I'm from Brazil, and
Okay,
similar. It might be similar, right, to the Spanish.
sure, I would think so.
Very similar. Well, but in my case, I know it probably happened to in your culture too. It might happen. One of the things that I really do not, I cannot even think about it these days. If I think about it, I'm not a parent. I don't have children, but if I had, is one of the things that I would not ever use methods of punishment like physical. What do you call it, spanking? So
Sure,
that was,
corporal punishment. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Spanking and all that. Yeah,
that was really something that it didn't help at all. And in my case, was just lowered my self-esteem. It kind of
yeah,
taught me not to trust myself. I think that was the main thing. It was
yeah.
really sad because I couldn't trust my intuition. I couldn't trust myself.
Sure.
I just completely lost touch with the body and mind. It was completely disconnected.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, so that's one of the things. I think teaching children, guiding them to trust themselves is really important.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I work with children and families. It was actually one of the things the first 3 years of my career was working with children and families.
Yeah.
Um, and you're absolutely right that what we're teaching children when we use corporal punishment, when we choose to spank or hit, and I'll say this, that, in our cultures, and especially before these times, a while ago, it was just acceptable that that's how you raise children,
Right.
you know, and but you're teaching children to gain compliance through aggression. That if I don't get what I want, or if you don't behave the way I want, the way to get that compliance is through aggression, and that aggression can be yelling or it can be hitting until I get what I want.
Right.
So I always tell parents, and a lot of parents will make excuses and say things like, well, I was raised that way and I came out fine. Um, or they'll say, well, I'm not going to praise my child for doing something that he should do. And, and I always think to myself that this is a form of resistance and changing. And children grow up, children grow up, and at some point they become strong, sometimes stronger than their parents.
Yeah.
And I've seen time and time again where kids will stick up for themselves in a physical way as well. And so, we base a lot of what we do on research, and what research supports is that there are healthier ways to develop self-esteem, develop a person to be independent, to manage emotions well, and to have healthier interpersonal functioning in their life, whether it be with their significant other or friends or things like that. So
Yes.
it's unfortunate, but I see it a lot. What you're describing as parents who spank or use a belt, or I mean, I've heard many other different ways. It's sad to hear.
It is, isn't it? It is, and that's one of, see, exactly what you said. There are so many different ways of behaving, of dealing with situations, right? Any
Sure.
situations. And that's where that openness comes in. Being open, being curious, not closed-minded. I don't know everything, so especially
Yeah.
also when if we have the value of treating ourselves and others with kindness, being able to get the felt understanding that everything is interconnected, that we
Yeah.
are here a human community, that this is not something that, we just navigate in a fragmented way. One thing's affecting the other.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think from that understanding, amazing things could happen. That with an open mind, oh my God, everything would be amazing. That's why
Yeah.
I do this, these podcasts and what I do these days. I,
Hmm.
I just wish for more people to be, in touch with these conversations so they can
Yeah.
somehow kind of understand that they can do something differently, that we can think differently, we can change ourselves, and by
Sure.
doing so, change our environment, our reality.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it just takes one experience, like you're saying, listening to this podcast or this interview, or hearing one of your other interviews, and it resonating with someone,
Yeah.
for them to maybe start that journey of just exploring, whether it be gathering information online, or seeking services somewhere, or spirituality, whatever it is. I think there's these little things that spark that interest, that
Yes.
grow into a big flame. So I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, that's how I feel. Thank you. Thank you for saying
Hmm.
yes again to this.
Yeah.
So, within that, I had a question for you here. One of my
Sure.
initial questions about what are some of the fundamental truths that about human beings that you have learned from your personal experience in these humans' life and professionally too? So I heard already you saying something interesting about survival, because you will refer to the caveman many times. So that kind of made me think about, that we are programmed to survive. The body is, right? And then in
Yeah.
connection with the mind, that's what it does. So,
Yeah.
would you say that that's one of the fundamental truths that you have found, Richard?
Sure. I think, yeah, yeah, sure. I mean, I think we are programmed to survive. That's how we've survived all these years and evolved to who we are. But as I mentioned before,
Yeah.
where the caveman survival was life and death, his physical well-being, our survival has now extended into protecting our self-esteem, protecting our livelihood, protecting our happiness.
Yeah.
So, we have that same fight or flight response, that same stress response in our body, to these things too. Right? I mean, the caveman probably didn't worry about a presentation in front of his peers, right? That he probably didn't care about those things, but we do.
Yeah.
And the thought that we'll be judged in a negative way, or that it'll impact us a certain way, we maybe don't even think about how we'll cope, if we can cope. But these things cause us just as much stress and anxiety as something that's life or death. You know, so so yeah. I mean, I think with that in mind, survival.
Yeah.
I think maybe, again, changing our view on what survival means, and just this awareness that my attempts to protect my self-esteem, sometimes are not the best. It's there to protect me, but sometimes it leads me astray.
Right. Right. So that's another amazing topic about protection, right? How we are programmed to protect ourselves, survive, as you said. It has to do with protection, fear. And I wonder, some people talk about thriving, about living from a place. Like in my case, my main interest is freedom, in a
Hmm.
sense of being able to not detach, but actually be so close to the human experience as a whole that there's nothing left really. I'm not trying to be anywhere else but here. Even if I'm unhappy now, if I'm sad, I stay with that and I'm present to what is here. So
Yeah,
I'm never kind of running from anything, trying to escape anything, but in the destination becomes the journey. I think you mentioned that too, which is something that I really love that
yeah,
idea that, that this is it, that we are not really living for the future. Oh yeah, you say
yeah.
one of your blog posts says, focus on the journey, not the destination.
Sure, sure. I agree. I think sometimes we're so worried about getting somewhere. I can't wait to finish school. I can't wait to have a home. I can't wait to work in my profession. I think the first time that I really
Yeah.
became very aware, of the journey was I think probably during my graduate studies, where I found myself sometimes thinking like, man, I can't wait to be done with school and, working and making better money, because at the time I was working as a therapist, but I was also going to school. So I was limited in how much I could work and everything. And I remember somewhere along the way figuring out that this was just an amazing moment in my life where I could immerse myself in learning. The people in my life were amazing. I got to work in the profession that I would be becoming a doctor in later, and it just became this moment of almost embracing or appreciating.
Mm.
I won't even say I even call it the sacrifice or struggle, because it wasn't. I mean, I didn't have all the things that I could have, but like I said, it was an amazing time with amazing people, and just becoming aware that it was a significant moment in my life as I worked toward a goal, made every day pleasurable. Even now, I look back on that time, and I think to myself, man, it was just such an amazing time and the people that came into my life shaped who I would become as a therapist and as a person. Um, I'm still in touch with a lot of them. So yeah, definitely. You mentioned freedom, and I know that we talked a little bit about choice therapy.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and certainly through choice therapy, we explore a lot of how our choices are impacting the circumstances we find ourselves in, and the information that's available to us. And when we're trying to control other people, controlling other people can come in the way of wanting validation from them, wanting understanding from them, wanting recognition from them. Um, with the golden rule here is that we can't control other people. And the more we do, the more frustrated we live our lives. And so many times our choices revolve around those needs. One of them being freedom, the other power,
Oh,
uh,
yeah, right.
and fun. I mean, we need fun. We can't. Everything can't be serious and work. Um, so yeah. I mean, freedom and power are two very very big ones. That for us, freedom is very different than, let's say, freedom in other countries. I mean, so power too. Power can also be the ability to impact change in our lives, to do something in our lives and impact change. That not everybody has that power. So this awareness helps us shape what our choices are and to take accountability. If I am unhappy in my job, but I'm choosing to stay in that job, well, then I'm accountable for how I feel at that point.
Right.
Just as if I choose to look around and change jobs, when I find a better fit, or if I choose to go back to school, or whatever it is, I'll also be accountable when my circumstances improve and when I'm happier. And so it really is about exploring those choices and knowing the choices you're making, and being accountable for how you feel that way. So it's not really other people or this world that is in control.
Yes, 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 yes. Oh, that's another huge lesson that I learned, yeah, on that journey of healing psychologically, emotionally, that blaming other people, blaming the past that didn't
Sure.
do much. It was actually getting the situation much worse. I was feeling stuck. So yeah, that's a big one, taking responsibility for what I was not responsible for, in a case, childhood abuse. So that
Yeah.
was a big one that
Sure.
I was able to understand. How do you define mental health these days, Richard? What is to be mentally healthy, if you were to put that into words?
It's a good question. I think, we talk about mental health or mental well being, as people
Yeah.
say. And maybe it comes in different forms for different people. I mean, because if we're going to measure mental well being by happiness, uh, well, happiness is subjective too, right? Happiness is a construct that's undefined. We each define what happiness is in our life. And so I think being mentally healthy,
Yes.
I think, is being able to manage the difficulties that come your way. It's managing those difficult emotions like stress and anger and sadness. They're part of life, but they don't have to control our lives. And while some circumstances are just naturally stressful,
Yes.
like
Right.
getting a medical diagnosis is naturally stressful. Losing a loved one is naturally stressful. Um, but also, positive things in our lives are stressful too. Getting married can be stressful. Uh, Getting another position, even if we're going to get paid more, but maybe comes with more responsible, can be stressful. And sometimes it's the accumulation of a lot of little stressors throughout your life, and sometimes it's one big traumatic event. But
Yeah.
there's just so many situations and so many opportunities to be stressed that I think being a healthy person mentally is being able to manage those things, recognizing them, managing them, and moving past them.
Yes. Yes. And that takes practice, right, Richard? It's not something
Absolutely.
that we learned in one moment in time.
Oh, easier said than done. 100%. Right. Oh, absolutely. Well, I always think of it this way: is that however old we are, it's taken us that long to develop the coping mechanisms that we have,
That's
and
true.
to be the person that we are. And so, changing that, whether you're 30, 40, 50, whatever age you are, changing that in a week, 2 weeks, or just because you learned something, um, is just it's impossible. I mean, it's an ongoing process. It's probably lifelong. Um,
Yeah.
I think of it as as almost an athlete. An athlete practices every single day, so that when it's game time, the skill is developed. And I think meditation, mindfulness, spirituality, or a psychological approach to understanding your thoughts and changing them
Yeah.
is the same way. It's something that should be practiced all the time. So when something big comes along, the skill is developed. Um, so yeah, I agree with you that it's definitely not something that's easily done.
Yes. Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's something that really was one of the misconceptions that I had, that I would come to understand certain concepts and then that would have been enough. Okay, that's it. I
Yeah,
know this as a fact. So
sure.
now I'm done. Not really. So I had to
Yeah,
practice. It's a lot of practice. We have to
yeah,
be committed to develop that skill. It's not something
yeah.
that it will happen if we don't put the effort.
And I think that regression is part of change too.
Yeah.
In that understanding that I'm going to practice this, but I'm going to mess up. There's going to be times where I'm going
Yeah.
to regress back, and that's okay. You know, it's part of change. Nobody changes just like that. So yeah, it's a worthwhile journey though.
What's not to love about that, right? Always being gentle with yourself, or being kind, especially if you're learning something or trying to change something that has been there for a while. So
Yeah,
that's beautiful too, being compassionate to yourself. Gosh, Richard, we're almost at the end. Let me go through. Yeah,
sure.
well, I was curious about the idea of success too. So you kind of are they connected in a way for you? Being mentally healthy, this concept, your answer, would that apply somehow to the idea of success, or what is to be successful for you these days?
Yeah, success to me, I think, is feeling happy and fulfilled. I think, and for me, fulfillment comes from doing what I love. Being
Yeah,
able to do what I love, being able to make a living doing what I love, still having that fascination to keep learning about psychology and my craft, experiencing life. I think we talked a little bit about living here in paradise. Um,
yeah,
you know, People can find things wrong where they live all the time, whether they talk about hurricanes, the rain, the heat, whatever it is. Um, for me, I think being fulfilled and happy where I am is important, and finding that balance. Not everybody has the luxury of balance in their life,
yeah.
of work and enjoyment, and a happy relationship or whatever it is. And I think all of that is for me being successful.
Yeah. So in a way, you included balance. So it's coming back to the
Sure.
idea of finding harmony
Yeah.
Because we can, it's not perfection, right, Richard?
Yeah.
We are not speaking of perfection. It's all about like being able to dance life's dance. I love
Yeah.
that, meet challenges where you are in knowing, trusting yourself. There's something about trusting myself. I really love that idea. I mean, those I know I have those skills because I've been put in too many challenging situations to know that
Yes.
how
Yes.
how I'm able to still handle them. And that's kind of interesting with the for trauma survivors, as they call it. I don't label myself that way, but it seems like we tend to become more resilient. Do you find that to be the case? I don't know if there are some studies. Probably they are, right?
Well, you said some great things there.
Yeah.
I'll say that you said some great things there with trusting yourself.
Yeah.
For some people, they trust religion, they trust God. Some people can trust themselves. Some people trust this universe that things will work out for them. And the other part of that was I love that you focused on past events that you've been able to overcome,
Right.
because I think that the more that we can collect this evidence that shows that we can overcome, or that we're resilient, or that we're strong, um, the more we have that list or that little bag of evidence when we need it. And sometimes something stressful will come along, and maybe we don't see how we can overcome it, but we trust. We trust in our resilience, or we trust in religion, or whatever it is we trust in. We know that it'll work out,
Yes.
and that makes it true, because when we do work it out, we realize that we had the tools all along. So yeah, you're absolutely right in recognizing all the time and how far you've come. Um, I think, I think that's what part of what makes resilience, and makes someone stronger, is being able to recognize those things.
Yes.
Um, but certainly, someone from a trauma background has had some huge challenges to overcome, more than most of us. So,
Yes, yeah, that's something that I just found out later on in life, of course, not
mm,
knowing what that was.
mhm.
Have you had these experiences too, Richard, yourself, of trauma?
Yeah, the capital T traumas are the big traumas in life that can be physical, emotional, sexual abuse, or war.
Yeah.
And then there's those lowercase t traumas that can be certain experiences in life, whether that be in childhood. They could be a parent who didn't validate you, or a parent who didn't give you the love that you feel would have been helpful to you at the time. Or it can be early relationships, you know,
Right.
um, certainly. I mean, I would say that more lowercase t traumas, little things that, like I said, some of it's cultural, and some of it is just experiences in life with my parents, who are both loving people. But as we said, no one's perfect.
Right.
And
Oh, yeah.
so many of those little traumas become triggers in life, and those triggers affect our interpersonal function, our relationships, romantic relationships, relationship with peers, and in a way, re-traumatize us every time, you know, when those outcomes are not positive.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, I think we all have at least some little traumas that have shaped who we are, and how we experience the world and cope. Um, I'll say that it sounds as though perhaps your traumas have been more significant, though.
Yeah. It's interesting to know also that trauma, you have something, I know, on your website, another post that said, what is it? Oh, here about trauma. Yes, trauma. The scars you don't see are the hardest to
Sure,
heal.
sure.
Yeah, that caught my attention too. And, you know, and I heard about the capital T and the small t trauma. I don't know. I don't know about that because I would say that it depends how sensitive the person is.
Sure,
So the
sure.
level of sensitivity, right? If you are
Yeah,
some people they have, I don't know, you probably heard about the highly sensitive people. So they can get traumatized with small things that seem small for some of us, but actually it might be big for them. It might traumatize them in a in a big way, in a
Sure.
sense,
Yeah.
right? So I don't know. Do you have you heard about that? The it depends. Trauma is really, it depends on the person.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it depends on the person and how they internalize the experiences, their ability to cope with those experiences, genetic predisposition,
Right.
things like that. But certainly, what can be traumatic for one person may not be for another. Um, and that is a very individual experience for each person. I'd say that some people go through life not recognizing that they're traumatized.
Yes. Right.
They just go through life accepting their reactions or justifying their actions, and never recognizing that this is a form of trauma. This response, this way that I try to get love from my partner, is a response to trauma. Instead, they'll justify their behaviors, even if they're maladaptive, um, or blame the other person. In doing so, like we said, protect the self-esteem.
Right.
Right? Um, so, so a lot of times, sure, I mean, different people experience events in very different ways.
Right. We're almost at the end. Gosh, Richard, I'll talk to you forever. And I have all these notes, all these questions.
Sure, no,
So interesting. Recently I was just kind of reflecting about that. And I was wondering if actually most of the mental distress, in disorders, issues that a lot of us have, it's coming from trauma. Would you say that most mental problems come from trauma? Would you say that?
yeah, I mean, I think that we can look at how we perceive trauma and think that depression can come from
Yeah.
trauma, past events, regrets, and things like that, or how we've learned early on how our parents treated us. And I hate to always bring it back to our parents, but yeah, right. But anxiety as well, and so sure, I mean, a lot of our experience in childhood can be considered traumatic. And I think maybe some people would cringe thinking that, my father not validating me wasn't traumatic. I grew up that way and I'm fine.
Yeah.
But for some people, feeling not validated by their parents is something that they seek lifelong in their partners, is to be validated and perceive some actions as not validating, which cause fights or arguments or wanting exception or love or security, whatever it is. So, and I think that perhaps some of this insight is what helps people to start changing. It's kind of that first step that something's different, or something's not right, or something I can change.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I think a lot of people, unfortunately, I think a lot of people go through life suffering and just accepting that this is just part of life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another sad truth in a way, right? In this context, yes, I've seen that in my family members, friends. They just unhealed traumas, unhealed psychological problems that they believe that this is how it is, and
Yeah,
they kind of embrace as this is me, or it won't change. That's how it works. It's really
sure.
sad to see that, and we can't force anyone to change. So it's really being there for them no matter what.
Yeah, yeah,
That would be the definition of love, right? Unconditional love, accepting
absolutely.
them.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. We can't make people change.
Right.
It's one of the first steps is recognizing I need to change. That something needs to change here. And I always think of when people come to therapy, um, you know, they have suffered, and the level of suffering that people need to go through before they recognize they need to change is different for everyone. And
Right.
so, while for me, I just met them and they just came in and we're establishing a rapport and they're going to be my client and we're going to work on things, I realized that for them, that journey was very long before they got to that couch. They suffered a lot. They tried different things. They've had things in their life that didn't quite go their way.
Yeah.
They've contemplated change. They've looked online or wherever they found me. They've come in. They've made an appointment. And so I realized that they have suffered significantly before they come and seek help.
Oh yeah.
So, unfortunately, some people will probably suffer more before they recognize they need help. Like we said, through anything, through religion or self-help books, or online stuff or therapy.
Yes. Yeah. And that's wonderful to be in the position that you are. I love the work of therapists and coaches because you are actually with people that are ready to change, and
Yeah,
that's where your skills, right, to just they become what they're supposed to become. Then you're
absolutely.
passing on that wisdom.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And I wonder if I ask the question sometimes in a funny way, if you therapists, coaches try to do that with family members. Everybody's my client now.
Yeah. It's we learn we learn early on not to. We just sit there. We may think it a little bit,
Oh yeah.
but we learned a long time ago to just not say anything. And it's not our job to.
That is funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember somebody saying that because I love, psychology and just get into people's mind. And then friends of my husband said, "Oh, don't psychoanalyze me." I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not even a psychotherapist or anything, but because I ask those questions, deep questions.
Sure.
So it's
Yeah.
interesting how it sometimes it's just part of this life, isn't it? Being curious. I love that, though. I
Yeah.
can't
Oh
help
yeah.
but ask deep questions to everybody,
Sure.
and it sounds like a therapy session, but it's just to me, it's living life to the fullest. That's how
Yeah.
exploring the inner world. I just love that.
Yeah. Well, I think the more we learn also about these concepts and different ways of looking at things, the more aware we become of these things, the more when we talk to someone, the more we want to know. And the more, it just changes. It changes our perception of people.
Right?
So it's
Yes.
difficult not to sometimes, but I've learned a long time ago to turn that off when I'm with family and friends. They're not my clients, and so,
Right. I think it's a one-way road too. We can't really go back. Once you see certain things, you can't unsee it, right, Richard?
oh yeah,
So
very true. Very
yeah,
true.
we develop new models, new perceptions, ways of seeing reality. But anyway, I want to mention your website, counseling, SOFLO.com. That's
Yeah.
counseling
Okay.
South Florida, short,
Yep.
right? For short, you have SOFO, but I'll have it here so it'll be clickable on the podcast notes.
Great. Great.
And I want to mention your services that I found on your website, individual
Okay.
therapy, child and family, couples in marriage, group therapy, telehealth, and also testing and assessment. Did I
Yes.
miss anything, Richard? Did I
No, you
miss
got it. I
any
appreciate
service?
that.
So, and did you leave anything unsaid for this conversation? I know I had so many more questions here for you in notes, but the time.
No, it was a joy to talk to you, and I feel I rambled too. I think you asked some great questions, so I think that got me just on and on going. And I mean, like I said, this is my passion too. So when I can nerd it up with someone about psychology, um,
Yeah,
you know,
that's it.
I could do it all day. So I appreciate your time and your thoughtful questions and meeting with you today.
Thank you. Thank you for saying yes, and
Sure.
thank you for being you. Before we say goodbye, I do have a question for you here that I usually ask everyone. I have to ask you. What three experiences you wish everyone to have before they die, before they lose the body?
Wow. Three experiences. Well, certainly love.
Yeah,
To find love, um, to find purpose in life,
yeah,
whatever that purpose is, whether it be through being a parent or religion, or helping people to find purpose, um, love, and just to find happiness, to be fulfilled.
yes,
It wouldn't be anything materialistic or anything financial. It really is just finding that thing that really makes them feel good.
yeah. That sounds wonderful. And that's interesting. I hear love over and over and over again every
Yeah,
time
is
I
that a big
ask the question. Yeah,
one?
it comes as the first one pretty much for
Yeah,
everyone. That's amazing, right? How it's a
yeah,
fundamental truth to me, and that's a fact to me. When I
yeah,
hear that over and over again, it's a confirmation because it's here too. That's how I feel. So when I see
yeah,
everybody kind of confirming that, like love is the most
yeah.
important thing.
It's such an amazing emotion, I guess, that we all think like,
Yeah.
that we wish that everyone could feel that. So that's interesting that everybody comes up with that. around birth. So, wow, that's great.
Yes, that's a big one. So thank you so much again for sharing wisdom. And I call it timeless wisdom because they are transcendent. It's not really about survivor only. It goes beyond that. So thank you so much for
Thank you.
being curious enough and open to and engage with life at this level. And this is, it's not easy, a lot. Like I said, once we have seen some things, learned, we can't unseen.
Yeah,
So, and it takes responsibility. Also, knowledge is something that it's just something that's I hold in high regard, education, but knowledge, deep knowledge,
sure.
transcendent knowledge. So thank you so much, Richard, for your
Thank
presence
you.
in this reality in a healing way. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for doing what you do.
And
Thank
we'll
you.
talk again. We'll be in touch again. Take good care. Bye for now.
Okay, you too. Bye bye.
Bye.